will take your Bibles and turn over. Let's just begin over in the book of Exodus. I promise I will not go all the way to Revelation today. My wife told me, and this is Mother's Day, and I have to mind her. As a matter of fact, every day is Mother's Day, if you men would admit it. And she said, I want you to have a good beginning of your message. I want you to have a good ending. And I want you to put them close together. All right, over in Exodus chapter 2, and really chapter 1 too, but keep that in mind as we begin our message this morning. I was thinking about the little boy that his daddy took him camping. Spent the weekend together. On the way home, he said, "Son, didn't we have a good time?" He said, "Yes, sir, Dad, I guess we did." But he said, "Next time, could we have Mom and the ketchup come with us?" And we dads sometimes think we're the most important one in the family, but we're not. Really, we're not. I got to share this with you about the little fellow on his birthday. His daddy said, "What would you like for your birthday?" And he said, "I'd like to have a baby sister." And sure enough, wasn't too many months before Mama brought in a baby sister, and he was so proud. Next year, Daddy said, "What would you like to have, son, for your birthday this year?" And he said, "Daddy, really, what I would really like to have is a pony, but I think that'd be too hard on Mama." Of all the years that I've been in the ministry, I've never preached on Mother's Day using Jochebed as an example of a godly mother. I don't know why I've missed that, but today I'm going to do that. And I'm not going to talk to you today about how to treat your mother or how to appreciate her. I want to speak to you today about a mother who had to make some tough choices, hard choices concerning the welfare of her son. She and her husband, they had 3 children, Aaron and Miriam and, of course, Moses. And today I want us to focus primarily on the relationship that she had with Moses and draw some conclusions from that. And I know it's tough being a mother. I watched the mother of my children, our children. As a matter of fact, it's tough at being a father. But mothers and fathers, we have to make some gut-wrenching decisions that require sleepless nights in prayer. Godly child rearing requires a lot of faith. I'm talking about some tough faith. Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. Let me read that to you, please. You follow along in your Bibles. "And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi." And we know that was Amram and Jochebed. "And the woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw him, that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she looked for him an ark of bulrushes, or she took for him an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and laid it in the flags by the reeds, by the river's bank, or brink. And his sister stood afar off to wit that would be done to him," to find out what was going to happen. "And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, the reeds, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child. And behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, 'This is one of the Hebrews' children.' Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, Miriam, shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I'll give thee thy wages. I'll pay you good. And the woman took the child and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, Because I drew him out of the water. One of the first things that I want us to notice about this mother, Jochebed, was that she had compassion. She was a mother of love. And I would like to think that all mothers really had that kind of love, but I realize there are some exceptions, but not here today. Jochebed is mentioned only a few times in the Bible, but what a great impact that she has and had on the events that's recorded in the Bible and even in this world and eternity. And she gives us a great example of a mother with compassion. As a matter of fact, she's mentioned in God's Hall of Fame there in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23. And we know that her and her husband's name because it's recorded in Numbers chapter 26 and verse 59. Jochebed and Amram. Now let me share some background with you. Let me read you a paraphrase, the paraphrase from the Living Bible of chapter 2, starting at verse 8. Then eventually a new king came to the throne of Egypt who felt no obligation to the descendants of Joseph. He told his people, These Israelites are becoming dangerous to us because there are so many of them. Let's figure out a way to put an end to this. If we don't, and war breaks out, they'll join our enemies and fight against us and escape out of the country. So the Egyptians made slaves of them and put brutal taskmasters over them to wear them down under heavy burdens while building the store cities of Pithom and Ramesses. But the more the Egyptians mistreated and oppressed them, the more the Israelites seemed to multiply. The Egyptians became alarmed and made the Hebrew slavery more bitter still, forcing them to toil long and hard in the fields and to carry heavy loads of mortar and brick. Then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, instructed the Hebrew midwives to kill all Hebrew boys as soon as they were born, but to let the girls live. But the midwives feared God and didn't obey the king. They let the boys live too. And the king summoned them before him and demanded, Why have you disobeyed my command and let the baby boys live? Sir, they told him, the Hebrew women have their babies so quickly that we can't get there in time. They're not slow like the Egyptian women. And God blessed the midwives. So the people of Israel continued to multiply and to become a mighty nation and became the midwife. And because the midwives revered God, he gave them children of their own. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people to throw the newborn Hebrew boys into the Nile River. But the girls, he said, they can live. Now, that gives us a little background into this situation here. The nation of Israel had been in Egypt approximately 400 years, and they had grown numerically. They prospered, but before long they became a threat to the king. He was concerned about his throne. He was concerned about them overthrowing him. So he forced them into slavery by hard labor. They built these two cities and perhaps some other cities. Now, he wanted to break their backs, but not only their backs, he wanted to break their spirits, and so he required even more from them. As we read, he commanded the Hebrew midwives. Now, when you're called and these Hebrew women having children, if they have a boy baby, you kill those boy babies. You can let the girls live. So, but you see what we read, the midwives feared God more than they feared Pharaoh, and so they let the boy babies live also. And so Pharaoh had to resort and come up with some other plan to carry out his dastardly deed and his evil. So he told his people, he said, now I want you to look out, all the Egyptians, I want you to look out, and when you see any boy baby, I want you to take those babies, or that baby, when you see one, and I want you to throw him into the Nile River, and I want you to be sure that that baby is drowned. You see, it was during this kind of times, it was during this time that Jochebed became pregnant with Moses. She didn't have to worry about Aaron and Miriam. They were fine. But the unborn baby in her womb would be the object of murder by the Pharaoh and the Egyptian people. Now, folks, listen to me. Can you imagine living with that kind of fear? I can't imagine that. And yet, when I think of the time that Jochebed was pregnant with Moses, I think of mothers today. Folks, these are challenging times for mothers in our world. We're living in a world where our unborn babies are being threatened with abortion, and they are being aborted. As a matter of fact, in 2020, the Guttmacher Institute reports that 930,160 babies were literally aborted in that year alone, and that figure does not include those abortion pills that were received outside of clinical settings. Now, I know that Roe versus Wade has been overturned, but listen to me. Abortion will be a platform, and at least one of our parties in the election of 2024. You can bet and be assured of that. There are forces at work today to drown our children. Now hear me and hear me well. Our kids are being tossed into the river of violence and promiscuity that's pouring from our television screens and from the internet and from our movies today. They're being drowned in a sea of confusion as the lines between right and wrong are blurred in our society. In our schools, the woke agenda is out to erase the line of gender in our children's minds. They are being drowned in a competitive culture that rewards performance over character. And I could go on and on and on. You godly mothers know how dangerous it is to try to raise a child in our world today. Yes, our children aren't being thrown into the Nile, but they are being thrown into the rivers of immorality and evil by those who perpetrate those kinds of things, and they're out to rob you and get your children from you and take away your children from you and drown them in these rivers of evil and immorality. In the dangerous world in which Jochebed lives, she stands out because she was a mother who loved her child. And you know what amazes me is these people who were hollering abortion, abortion, they're still alive. The unborn baby don't have a voice. I wonder what would happen, and it may very well happen because what goes around comes around many times. I wonder what would happen if these same people who were hollering abortion, one day, their scalp may be called for. Their life may be called for by people who say, we don't need you anymore. You're not profitable to our agenda anymore. We want to get rid of you. We want to kill you. Quote, we want to abort you. I wonder how many would be marching and hollering for rights then. You ever thought about that? They're alive. They can holler, my body is my right and I can do with it what I want and I can kill that unborn baby, murder it if I want to, him or she. I can do that. But what would happen if they were on the other side of the coin? And it could very well happen before this old world ends. Jochebed loved her child, and she did what she could, and then she turned the rest over to God. As we continue, we're going to see her compassion and how it led to her having to make some hard decisions concerning her son. Not only was she a mother of compassion, but she was a mother of courage. Folks, I'll tell you, tough love demands some tough decisions. Listen to how the writer of Hebrews describes her. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, Jochebed and Amram, because they saw he was no ordinary child. He was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. Mothers, listen to me this morning. Grandmothers, listen to me. Don't be afraid to stand up for your child. Don't be afraid to stand up against those who perpetrate the kinds of things that are throwing our children into these rivers of violence and promiscuity and immorality, and on I could go. Take a stand. Don't be afraid of them. Take courage. That took courage by Jochebed to defy the edict of Pharaoh. Think for a moment how hard it was to hide Moses. Hide him for 3 months. I couldn't have hid Susan and Jeff for a day. Think of the noise they make. Think of the crying they do. How hard it must have been, but they did it. They did it. Folks, courageous faith is an active faith. It sometimes calls on us to do risky things. I think of mothers who give up lucrative careers so they can stay home with their children while other people around them are saying, "You're crazy." What gives them that kind of courage is the fear of God, and they fear God more than they fear man. They trust God to do what He's promised them He would do as they are obedient to what God has called them to do in the face of threatening circumstances. He'll take care of them, they believe, and He'll take care of their children. I think of the mothers who say no to their teenagers when everyone else is saying yes to theirs. Who won't back down? Who won't quit? Who won't give up? Who won't give out? They'll keep on keeping on being the kind of mama that they ought to be. Folks, we have some marvelous, wonderful mothers today, but I pray to God that we could have some more wonderful, marvelous mothers today like our mothers used to be. We didn't have much, folks, when my kids were growing up. But I'm going to tell you, and we were blessed beyond measure. But Susan and Jeff, when they came home, they knew that Mom would be there. They didn't have no designer jeans, and they didn't have no designer shoes. And I remember one year, Juanita made Susan a dress. And I told her, "Sweetheart, somehow or other, we'll come up with the money next year to buy her a dress for Easter." But neither one of my kids, I'll guarantee you, if you'd ask them, would trade what they had in their mama for what they could have had with all the money in the world. Jeff told me not long ago, he said, "Daddy, I thought that all that potato soup we were eating was because we liked it." I said, "No, son, that's because we didn't have anything else but that." But I'll tell you, they had a godly mama. A godly mama, a courageous mama. I think of single parents, single mothers. I think of mothers who are having to work to provide financial support for the family. The family couldn't keep going, couldn't meet their financial obligations or anything else without her working. And I feel for them because I know they would like to be at home with their children if they could. So I'm certainly not being negative about these mothers. But these mothers, they find a way to make it work. They find some good babysitters. they find ways to supplement that time that they would have had at home. They come up with, because that's the way mothers are. They do what they have to do. I think of that mother who would love to stay at home, but she can't because she don't have the finances to stay at home. Jochebed was courageous. Mothers are courageous today. And she was a very conscientious and clever mother. And we have some of those today as well. After hiding Moses for 3 months, she saw that, hey, now this is not going to work anymore. I'm going to have to go to plan B. And she had a plan B. She was very clever as to how she went about it. Listen to it. She made a little wicker basket, covered it with tar and pitch to make it float, and put it in the reeds there close to the bank of the Nile River. You know what's interesting to me is that word used for basket is the same word used for Noah's Ark. Same word. Both Noah and Moses were placed in an ark, which is at a very safe environment, considering that the occupants are at the mercy of the environment and the elements. The Nile River was famous for alligators. Now, hear me. Moses was helpless anywhere, but when she put him in that Nile River, he really was helpless. I mean, the alligator could have gobbled him up in a hurry. But she didn't send him floating down the river. She was clever. She said, what I'll do is I'll put him in these reeds close to the bank where all these Egyptian women come down to bathe and so forth. And some of them will see him, and they'll take him surely home and take care of him. Kind of like today, maybe a young lady can't afford to keep a child, and she'd put him on a hospital, maybe in front of the hospital, or put him on somebody's doorstep because she wanted to provide for him, wanted him to be provided for. And so this is Jochebed, and very clever. She put him in those reeds, and sure enough, as we see as we continue, that she had Moses' sister Miriam. Now I want you to stand down there and you watch and see what happens to Moses. See if somebody comes down and gets him out of that water. She knew that if she had have stood there, that folks would have known who she was. They would have known that she was Moses' mother. I remember when Jeff was he was our firstborn, and when he was little and started to school. How many of you remember when your kid started to school? First time went to school. I think it was Silas Mahone that we sent him to Silas Mahone. And I didn't know this until later on. His mama told me. She would go down there during the day and hide somewhere out there where Jeff couldn't see her. And when he come out for recess, she wanted to see if he was okay and he was being taken care of. That's a mama that loves her youngins, her children. And Jochebed was the same way, and you're the same way too. But here she was, very clever in her plans for Moses. Now, part of being clever is being able to improvise on the spot. Now, Mama, y'all know how to do that. I could ask some of you about doing that, and I'll guarantee you, you'd come up, you could tell me some things that we would laugh the rest of the morning. Like little boy that had his mama sent him to bed. Time for you to take a nap, and she could hear him grumbling in there when he was laying down. I don't know what it is. Every time Mama gets tired, I have to go to bed. Mama can improvise sometimes when she's feeding her children, when she's clothing them, when she's taking care of them. Not only was Jochebed compassionate, not only was she courageous, but she was compensated by God for being the kind of mama that she should have been and ought to be. Not only was Moses' mother able to take care of him, but notice now, the Pharaoh's daughter said, you take him and nurse him, and I'll pay you. So she got to nurse her own son, take care of him, and raise him up like that, and got paid for it. Tell me God ain't good. And you follow Moses' life, and you see how God used him. How God used an instrument of death, really, the Nile River, to become an instrument of life for him. How that he was educated with the very highest order, in the highest order, and prepared to eventually lead God's people out of the land of bondage there in Egypt. Folks, there are things a mother can do, but ultimately, they have to leave it in the hands of God. Do what they can, but leave it in the hands of God. And that's the hardest thing in the world to do. I know as a daddy, and you mamas know exactly what I'm talking about. Letting go. Letting go. A mother's love never changes, but parenthood is in a constant state, constant process of letting go, of letting go. Letting your child make mistakes, letting them learn some things the hard way, letting your adult child follow God's call. I remember talking with Norma and Dayton Cannon's daughter. What was her name? Jerry, when she went as a missionary to Israel, and they were really having some difficult times over there in Israel. And I remember what Dayton told me. He said the safest place in all the world is to be in the center of God's will. And he and Miss Norma recognized that as their child went to Israel as a missionary. It's hard. It's hard letting your child follow God's will sometimes. Sometimes that may get crossed up with our plans. But God, listen to me. I want you to take heart. God will use you, and God will reward you. He'll reward your compassion. He'll reward your courage. He'll reward your cleverness to accomplish His purposes. He's always working behind the scenes to accomplish His purpose in your children's lives. He will use you, but you must remember, it's not all up to you. It's not all up to you. Someone once turned to a full-time mom, stay-at-home mom, and they said, and I know you ladies like to do this, like to hear this, and what is it that you do, my dear? And she responded, listen to it, I'm socializing two Homo sapiens into the dominant values of the Judeo-Christian tradition in order that they might be instruments for the transformation of the social order into the kind of eschatological utopia that God willed from the beginning of creation. And then she added, and what do you do? Mothers, your ultimate purpose is to pass on to your children the Christian values that will ultimately cause them one day, when they reach that time, to ask Jesus to come into their heart and to save them, be their personal Savior, and that they might make the decisions which will accomplish His will in and through their lives. But don't worry, it's not all up to you. God is your partner. He's your helper.